Recording again, and I'm letting Elise in, so we should be good. All righty. So tonight's conversation will be on the panelists' experiences and perspectives from careers in the pharmaceutical and life science space. Now, please feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions. Additionally, we will have a gap. Will stop every couple of moderator questions so that you all can ask questions as well. But please don't hesitate to either raise your digital hand, your real hand, or just kind of unmute at a time where you see a little bit of a gap in the conversation. So lucky for us tonight, I'm going to try to pin our guests, and we have Elise Hartley, who's joining us from GlaxoSmithKline. We have Alicia Spearin from Sanofi, and we have Miriam Aziz from Bristol Squibb. So we welcome them tonight, and I am going to have them introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Alicia, and in the meantime, I'm going to try to pin everybody so that you can see all of our guests. So Alicia, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Great to meet all of you, and thank you all for joining. So I'm Alicia Spearin. I am MBA Keenan-Flagler class of 2020. Had to think about that one, couldn't remember. And I'm currently a senior product manager of HCP marketing for atopic dermatitis at Sanofi. I'll keep it at that. I was like, I'm sure we'll dive into more of the nitty-gritty later on, but great to meet all of you.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And Miriam?
Hi, everybody. I'm Miriam Aziz. I got my MS-PH and MBA dual degree from UNC. I graduated in 2018. I work at Bristol Squibb, which I think you got from my tile here. I've been with BMS for 5 years. So I was recruited from business school, and I've been there ever since. I absolutely love working there. So I'm excited to talk to you about my experience. I've had a variety of different roles and functions since I've been at BMS, but currently I'm an associate director of HCP marketing. I support several drug combinations in metastatic melanoma in our oncology department. So good to be with you all.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Miriam. And then Elise, who is having a little bit of issues with her cameras today, but I promise that she is there. I am going to have her introduce herself.
I'm physically here. It just seems the storm doesn't want the camera to show, but I'm in Chapel Hill with all of you, bracing the weather. Hi. So I'm actually a Carolina undergrad alum. I joined GlaxoSmithKline immediately after undergrad, graduated in 2014, and have been here ever since, so almost 10 years now. Have been fortunate enough to accelerate through a variety of different roles within the company, everything from leading market access strategy for vaccines and respiratory business to now I am senior director of our pipeline strategy. So ultimately what that means is I decide what drugs we should invest in with the insight of brilliant colleagues in R&D and medical, and develop the commercialization strategy for the medicines for GSK. So I'm excited to be here, even though I'm a black box at the moment.
Well, thank you so much, Elise. We greatly appreciate you sticking it out and still being here anyway. So again, thank you all for being here, our audience and also our panelists. We are going to go ahead and start with a general question. And again, we can popcorn around. And that would be, what steps did you take to land in your current career? And these can be steps way back, in your education, or steps that are recent. So I'll go ahead and put that out for the group.
Sure, I can start. And then I'll pass it over to whoever else wants to start. But so I look back and I'm like, oh, well, that's kind of a loaded question. I feel like there were a lot of different steps that kind of landed me where I am today. I think early on, I had an interest in working in the scientific field or in healthcare. I got my undergraduate degree in biology, and I sort of went down this health policy track So I've always worked in healthcare in some capacity, but the way I got into the pharmaceutical industry specifically was through UNC and on-campus recruiting at Keenan Flagler. And I think some of the things that really made me a strong candidate for BMS is that I had some experience in the healthcare space. I had a passion for working in the field, an interest in scientific innovation, and then I had the business acumen from business school. So I took a lot of marketing classes. I took a lot of consulting courses. I tried to like build a narrative around my coursework and my internships that, you know, I was able to really clearly articulate, you know, why I wanted to work in the pharmaceutical industry and why BMS. And I think that that had, you know, led to my success with the interview process and coming to BMS.
I'll go next because mine's a little bit similar to Miriam's at the beginning. So kind of so similar to her, I did my undergrad in biochem, and so I kind of, you know, had a background related to the healthcare space. And I guess I want to kind of caveat though, because I don't know if all of you have that. That's definitely not something that you need to break into this space. But so maybe I'll hop to present day where most of you are, right? I think one of the most important steps that I had taken to get to the career that I am present day is actually getting that MBA. I felt like I kind of lacked that business acumen. I knew I wanted to hop over to the commercial space of a biotech or pharmaceutical company and truly, you know, not to discredit the importance of the academic aspect of getting your MBA. I truly feel like it opened up my network and exposed me to different people that then kind of opened the doors for me that way. I did not go through on-campus recruiting for Sanofi. Quick plug, you can do that now. But when I was getting my MBA, Sanofi wasn't a school that UNC engaged with. So I actually took advantage of the diversity conferences that as students you have access to. So I actually went to National Black and met the Sanofi team there and had, you know, great conversations and really took advantage of that avenue, which led to an internship offer and then into a full-time offer at Sanofi.
For me, if I look back, you know, it's kind of baffling that I started out as a sales rep with absolutely no appreciation and understanding for pharmaceuticals, a background in psychology, and then 6 years later was a senior director with GSK leading gross to net, and that's not a typical path. So I will flag luck plays into that, you know, just timing and being in the right place at the right time, but. If I were to credit how I was able to advance my career at GSK and you know, not having an MBA, not having a biochem background to make up for those skill gaps, it's definitely performance and then being able to articulate transferable skills. So, you know, ultimately, and I know we're merging to some of the future questions, Susanne, but you know, the industry, of course, values, you know, subject matter expertise, but it's a business just like anything else. And they certainly value critical thinking, executive communication, ability to influence, strong accountability, strong, you know, just, you know, delivery of work. And that I was able to kind of demonstrate at each step of my job, despite not always having a clue what I was doing, and very quickly learned that those skills were most impactful of me not only getting into the field but staying and advancing. Less so, you know, how much I understood, you know, the differences between, you know, biotech and pharmaceutical development. Of course, that is valuable, but it's just like any other large business where if you can effectively translate those skills that you've gained across the breadth of your career, and tell that narrative in a compelling way, you have a lot of options out ahead of you.
Thank you so much. These were great answers, and I appreciate not only the diverse steps or pathways that you all took, but the fact of that narrative piece of how do you talk about the skills, abilities, and experiences that you've had. And that might really segue into this next question, because this is going to be twofold, kind of about what are the skills, abilities, and experiences that you really use every day. That's like, sometimes like you read a job description, or students might have a tour of a company, or you might hear in a company presentation, these are the skills you need, but we all know the reality of our real jobs. So that would be the first part. And then also, how do you talk about your qualities, those experiences and skills that you have, say in a job interview, knowledgeably, so that the folks interviewing you will understand, like, oh, okay, these people do have transferable skills. So I'll start with what do you really do every day, and what skills do you use most often?
Yeah, I can start, and I guess I want to really just piggyback off what Elise had said, right? Like, again, not to discount like being a subject matter expert and knowing the healthcare industry. I think those are things that we can all learn, right? Like, none of us are born with any of that. But I feel like really it's your soft skills that I think that you really need to like lean into. It's how do I actually, all three of us work for large organizations, but you might, maybe you're interested in a smaller organization, but it's still going to exist in terms of navigating like a matrix organization and working with cross-functional teams, right? Like at the end of the day, it's being able to kind of navigate the different personalities and the different people you'll encounter, and honestly leaning into kind of more like your like EQ and understanding when you can push things and when maybe you step back. But I would lean very heavily on my soft skills, and that's like where I feel like that really sets people apart, and how you're able to shine that way. Maybe I'll pass it off to someone else.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. We typically evaluate candidates based on their demonstration of our BMS values, and a lot of them are related to soft skills, passion, accountability, innovation, those kinds of things. I think we always get candidates who are super smart, who have great, educational backgrounds, but to Alicia's point, what really differentiates people are some of those softer like EQ skills. I think in marketing specifically, like communication is so fundamental to every single thing that I do every day. I've been on back-to-back calls since 8 o'clock this morning, and I'm constantly discussing our strategy and how we're going to meet our exit share goals with different stakeholders across our matrix teams. And our matrix team, so I work in HCP marketing. A matrix team partner would be somebody who works in patient marketing on the same brand, or someone who works in business insights and analytics on the same brand. Some of our enabling functions on our omni-channel teams, like we're all working towards the same goal. And as a marketer, especially in the HCP side of things, you are constantly bringing and wrapping your arms around different stakeholders to make sure everybody is moving on the same train together. So the communication is so fundamental to what we do. People always ask me, what courses should I take at Kenan-Flagler? And the business communications class was super helpful. I write emails all day long, and that class was super, super helpful for me. The oral presentation skills class that I think we were required to take ended up being really helpful. Even there was an improv class, which really got you comfortable with being on stage, which I also do. So all of those things have been helpful and supplement, the core curriculum, the quantitative skills, consulting type of skills, strategic thinking, that sort of thing.
So in terms of, Susanne, what do I do in a day? And I think obviously every day is different, but just to kind of give a taste, probably 30% of my time is actually head down and externally focused. So if my job is to figure out what assets we need to invest in for the future, I need to have a sense of where the unmet need is in the market, where the competitors are playing, the anticipated value, policy changes. So I probably spend a really decent chunk of my time looking at analyst reports and scanning clinical trials to see who's standing up a new trial, almost kind of competitive intelligence research, if you will, and having a sense of where the market is going. I'm privileged that my job forces me to do that, because I think there are often times in roles that I've had at GSK where it's always great to be externally focused, but you're often spending most of your time putting out fires internally and don't always get some of that precious just reading and reflection time. So my role requires me to do that now. So now I break it off. And then probably about 50% of my day is more in that matrix influence, probably transferable to all of our jobs. But for me, that's working with development leads and R&D and medical leads to figure out what is the best medicine. And often you have R&D colleagues who are going to be very passionate about the science and want to, pursue the science almost regardless of commercial opportunity. That's not always the case, but science comes first. So I have to negotiate with them more or less of, yes, I would love to go after this rare genetic disease, but is it aligned with GSK strategy, or will we be able to recoup development costs? So there's a lot of give and take and discussion around what that ideal medicine looks like. And then once you align at kind of a peer level, then you're always kind of prepping for those big investment decisions that are months in the making. And it's then the corporate presentation, it's managing up and down your lines and ensuring every component of the investment thesis is sound. So I do a lot of kind of forecasting and analytics in that respect, but then executive communication at the same time. So that's a bit of what my day looks like.
Terrific, thank you. So again, we're hearing a lot of soft skills, a lot of transferable skills. Before we move on to, I'm going to open the questions to the group, but I want to ask a question of how do students talk about those types of soft skills in an interview? Because you can't say, I'm a great people person. That means nothing. How can students translate? So if each one of you could just give me one example of how students can translate that on a resume and or in a conversation, that they have these very strong soft skills.
Yeah, I can start. So at Keenan Flagler, we typically practice in the STARS type of interview style, where situation, task, action, results. And I think when anybody asks you these behavioral types of interview questions, tell me about a time where you dealt with a difficult colleague, or tell me about a time where you faced a roadblock into, achieving XYZ. You can kind of pull in some of those softer skills into that STAR style interview where you're talking about the situation, the task, and then when you talk about the action, you can kind of pull in not only what did you do like in terms of like the project work, but what were some of the skills that you needed to succeed to get the result that you described for the R in the STAR format. And I did that quite a bit in my interviews.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback on what Miriam's saying, it's like it's focusing on not only like what you did, but how you went about doing it, right? It's like it's more of how you, because like yes, the result's important, but it's did you get there by brute force and you burned every single bridge down on the way to get like to do it, or did you like bring everyone together and there was consensus that was built, and like you talk about your negotiation skills. And because at the end of the day, I think people want to work with people that seem like, that they're kind and that they're actually pleasant to work with, not just that, you get things done with no regard to anyone else's feelings or anything of that sort.
I don't think I have anything further to add. I think you're hearing definitely follow the STAR format. It's used ubiquitously. Don't be afraid if you don't have the subject matter expertise. You can always find examples of good decision quality, of how you had to, move at pace, or how you had to do the right thing. Certainly look up the values of the individual companies who can use some of those buzzwords, because inevitably the STAR questions will be based on those buzzwords. And I have no doubt with all of you as students and successful students, you have examples of demonstrating those behaviors.
Yeah, one thing I want to chime in too is like, especially if there are people on this call that don't have any sort of healthcare background or science background, I think it's easy to think of like you're missing qualifications, but I would really lean in actually into, what is it that you're bringing to the table that no one else has? Because I think, even so we can get into this, but when I joined Sanofi, I joined as part of a commercial development, like rotational program. And when I joined the role that I'm in now, one thing that people had asked was like, oh, are you afraid because you don't have experience on this brand and in this therapeutic area or this disease or what have you? And thinking about, all the experiences that each of you have, you bring something unique to the table. And I think it's just crafting your story and what sets you apart. So don't think of like the things that, that you're missing anything. It's what kind of unique insights do you bring that will round out the team that you may or may not, that you may be joining.
Terrific. Again, terrific answers to probably just a more difficult question to answer. So thank you so much. And now I'd like to put it out to the group. I haven't seen any hands up again I keep scanning, but if you do have a question, I'd love for you to raise your hand right now or just kind of unmute and ask away. All right, Dahlia. I'll have Dahlia and then Tanya.
Thank you all so much for your time. I know it's 6:30 at least here on the East Coast, so appreciate your taking your afternoon or evening to be with us. So I have two questions. I'll just do one and then Tanya, you can go, and then I'll ask mine if no one else has questions. But my first one is, what is something that you wish you knew before coming into and joining your firm?
I guess I can start. I honestly did not have a full appreciation for how dynamic working in the pharmaceutical industry is. Like, it is changing literally all the time. And coming through a leadership development program like Alicia, I think you have to be really quick on your feet and really adaptable, because you're constantly onboarding and offboarding and learning new things. So you have to get really adept at dealing with change, ambiguity, leadership style changes. All of that would not have changed my decision. I just don't think I had a full appreciation for that before coming to BMS. But it's also one of the things that I love about it, because you're constantly learning, you're constantly challenged, and you're constantly looking for new opportunities, new things to learn, and you have the ability to switch positions. At BMS, it's basically every 2 years. So it keeps the work really interesting. I just don't think I had a full appreciation for that dynamic.
I'll go. So I maybe had a sense, but not until you're in it do you appreciate a little bit more on the negative side. The pharmaceutical business and industry is under immense scrutiny. And often I get teased at the dinner table, especially as my husband's a physician, that I work for the man, and I'm solely responsible for everyone's high cost of care. And as someone who is a bit more altruistic, that would grate on me at times. So you do have to kind of thicken your skin a little bit. I'm sure it's very similar to if you work in the financial services business. They're under the same type of scrutiny. And remember, the impact that you are having on people's lives, and remember why you're choosing this for your career. Ultimately, I did choose big pharma because I knew they would have the resources that would allow me to grow at a faster pace than a smaller aspect of the healthcare industry, and ultimately have a larger patient impact. But I kind of always chuckle that I do sometimes feel like I'm working for the man or the woman. In this case, I do have a female CEO, and have to kind of remind myself of that bigger picture to stay motivated and energized within the field.
I can round us out. So one thing I guess I wish I knew or was surprised, I feel like especially when you're in school, you're so focused on like the role, right? And we talk about like the pharma industry in this particular role. So I'll talk about like HCP marketing, right? Like it's almost like I forgot about like the company itself, like it's like your larger involvement with the organization. Like I know as you are starting to like explore different companies, like one thing it's easy to say like we all like at least we all have rotational programs, and it's like which one, like what's the difference between all of them, and it's hard to also kind of suss out the culture for all like the different companies. But that's something that I would really urge you to try to dig a little bit deeper in, and that's something I feel like I tried to, but I guess similar to both, like didn't have a full appreciation for it. So like while I yes have my day role, like that I am an HCP marketer, I do so much more outside of that, right? Like I'm still like a very active member of the CLDP. I am on the leadership team for one of our ERGs. So that's like our employee resource group. The way I like to think about it's like if you're in business school, it's like the clubs that you join too, right? So like there's so many things that contribute to like your day to day that I sometimes I feel like I forget that I do so much more than literally just my day job. So that's something that I would recommend, like kind of, doing a little bit more investigating as you're kind of doing your research.
Thank you.
Tanya.
Yeah, I think I'll go next. First of all, thank you for this webinar. This has been really insightful. I am one of those people on this call who doesn't come from healthcare background. I'm a finance person through and through, with a passion for healthcare industry for sure. So I wanted to know more about your experience in the rotational leadership programs, and specifically, Alicia, I was seeing that you had done your rotations in sales and marketing aspects. So I wanted to know, was that something that you told your recruiter beforehand, or did you decide that after you joined? And how did you make that decision, and what was your experience with the rotational leadership program?
Yeah, so I will say, so some companies do have like finance rotational programs, if that's something that still that interests you. And I guess I sort of want to make like a statement of, I feel like when people think of, I actually don't know what people think of when they say like, oh, like I'm interested in going into healthcare, right? Like I feel like when I was in business school, people would be like, oh, you're in healthcare. But I'm like, there's so many different facets within healthcare, and even within pharma, there's so many different facets within that, right? Like there's so many functions that take this entire organization to run. But that's a quick aside about a financial rotational program. But the one that I did was focused specifically in the commercial space. I did my internship at Sanofi. And so from there, I would say I didn't choose my rotations until pretty much right when I started. What I love about the program that I was in is I set out the different rotations that I wanted to, kind of with the end in mind, thinking what is it that I want to do and what are the kind of experiences that I need to set myself up for success down the line, but knowing that it's flexible. So I ended up keeping all of the rotations that I initially set out, but people in my cohort didn't. So for example, they decided that, maybe they wanted to actually go into like patient advocacy. So they ended up focusing more of their rotations on things that really brought them closer to the patient. So it might be like focusing on the patient support services team or our consumer marketing team. So there is flexibility depending on what company and what rotational program you choose. But at least the one at Sanofi, I didn't choose them until like I pretty much started. But then I had flexibility to change because, at the end of the day, it's kind of like you don't know what you don't know. And so it's kind of nice that you're able to kind of learn as you're doing it and then pivot as needed. But I'm sure that Miriam can probably chime in because she also did a rotational program.
Yeah, so for us, we kind of choose our rotations as we go. So for me, I always like the idea of leveraging something in your prior background while learning a new skill in your rotation. So I joined access marketing first because my background was mostly in healthcare policy consulting. So I had an access background, but was newer to marketing. So that was my first rotation. And from there, I went to HCP marketing, from there to oncology sales. And then my last rotation was worldwide marketing in a different therapeutic area in psoriasis immunology. So each one of the experiences kind of builds off of each other, but I definitely picked them as I went. Like I knew for sure access marketing, I knew I was going to do HCP marketing. Sales was a curveball for me. I didn't envision myself doing that, but I felt when I was in this HCP marketing role, your end customer is the physician, but the customer in between is the sales organization. You are selling to them first and training them first so that they champion that strategy and your messages to the physician. And so I felt like here I am like selling to the sales force, but I don't really have a full appreciation for what they're actually doing. And I felt like I lacked some level of credibility, or maybe it was my own complex, but I definitely feel like going into the field and really understanding what their day-to-day was like, how they're receiving information and being trained not only on our brand, but other brands, it kind of puts everything in context. So that was definitely something that I decided as I went through the program.
Okay, thank you.
Great. I'm going to, before Pranjal, somebody typed a question in, and this would be, first of all, thank you for the panel. How would a role in a large pharma company differ from a smaller pharma or biotech company? And I think you all had alluded to that earlier, but if anybody has any insight into that question, please do chime in.
So
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I can't say specifically for smaller pharma, but what I can draw a parallel to, which this is me guessing, and maybe Miriam or Elise can chime in about this. So within Sanofi, we have really large brands, and then we have really small brands. So the brand that I currently work on is a massive brand. For example, I work on specifically atopic dermatitis. Our marketing team is a team of 9 for this one indication. Yeah,
huge.
Which is good and bad, right? Sometimes it just takes forever, and there are pros and cons to that, right? Like I kind of have my swim lane. Maybe I don't have like visibility into what, like the left hand doesn't have visibility into what the right hand is doing, right? But if you're on, say, one of our rare disease marketing teams, there are 3 of them, and it's one person doing HCP marketing, one person doing consumer marketing, one person doing market development for literally the entire product. So a little bit of that, the pro there, right, is that you get a ton of experience. You get to kind of own everything, but maybe it's a little bit of like the blind leading the blind there, where maybe you don't have people that are like seasoned, I don't know, marketers that you can learn from. But I think I think that maybe this is a statement you could probably say regardless of industry, of working for a small company versus a large company, right? It's just you have more, you get to wear more hats, but then maybe you don't become a subject matter expert. Maybe you don't get to, I don't know, maybe you get to see everything, but then maybe it's like all very surface level. I don't know, maybe I'll pass it off to someone else.
Oh, I think that's accurate. I come from the perspective of we've acquired a lot of small biotech companies. So I've worked with a lot of individuals from those smaller biotechs. The culture tends to be a bit different. It's a faster paced type of business. I think the stereotypes of big pharma and small biotechs tend to be true. Like we move a little slower at BMS just because we have more policies in place, we have more employees, that sort of thing. Whereas, some of these smaller biotechs have 1 or 2 products. It's just a completely different mindset when you have 10 people working on a product in Seattle versus, I work in I think Bristol Myers Squibb, we have like 35,000 employees. So it's just a really different type of way of working. But I agree with what you were saying with kind of being the jack of all trades and seeing it all and having a lot of control over what you're doing. That's also adds a lot of pressure, right? So you got to stepping into a role like that. I personally like that I have a lot of different colleagues to work with me on our brands.
Right, Elise? I don't know if you have any insights there as well.
Nothing further to add. We can move on.
Okay, great. And so we're going to move on to Pranjal.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Susanne. Alicia, Miriam, Elise, I can't say how excited I am to talk to you because I've actually spent the last 4 years working very closely with folks like you. I've been at ZS Associates for 4 years, and specifically, oh yes, I see Miriam smiling already.
I love my ZS colleagues. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Of course, it so turns out that I kind of focused on a very specific therapy area over the past 2 years, and it turns out that it actually is melanoma. What
Oh,
I'm
wow.
wondering is, if I am so fortunate as to made an offer to join one of you, I'm just wondering, would I be allowed to continue my focus on that therapy area, or does BMS or Sanofi or GSK prefer to maybe shuttle their interns around, have them investigate here and there, see what they like? Because I am pretty sure that I want to continue with my subject matter expertise that I've built in that area.
I think this speaks to kind of how, I chose my first rotation was in access marketing because I wanted to leverage that previous background. So I don't think that there's anything prohibiting you from doing that. I think that's a great way to learn a new company, learn the systems, learn the new people, immediately be a value add in particular area, especially if you're passionate about working in melanoma specifically. So yeah, I would advise it. I would just say, like, there is a benefit to diversification. Brands go off patent all the time, like at BMS, and I think across the industry, people like to see that you're capable of working in multiple therapeutic areas and multiple brands, especially in leadership positions. So I would recommend, diversifying a little bit, but there's nothing really stopping you. I think it would be a great idea to leverage some of your previous background.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to know. Thanks, Miriam.
Righty. And Dahlia.
Yes, back again. Thanks, y'all. So just thinking about, back when you all were in our shoes, like we're looking for internships soon. So in the MBA program, and then Elise, for you respectively, when you're an undergraduate, because I know you said right out of undergrad, you joined your firm. So what questions did you ask yourself to really help you determine where was best for you, the best fit for you for the next step in your life? I'm really thinking about, like, what introspection should we really do to ensure that the next step is the right one for us?
Maybe as a follow-up, Dahlia, can you give me an example? Trying to decide the size of company, the type of role, the type of company, where you should live. Like, give me a more narrow focus, and then I can guide you.
Yes, I know it's personal for everyone. Me specifically, I'm interested in hospital administration, and I know it's very different than this industry, but I'm thinking about that versus, like, knowing the whole industry is really important. So payer space, or even doing some healthcare consulting work. Pharmaceutical industry is really relevant as well. So there are just various options, and knowing a little bit about everything is beneficial, but figuring out where the best place is kind of like, I have to figure out what that will look like. So if you have any insights to that.
Well, obviously, if you're passionate about hospital administration, and if you need to gain experience there, then prioritize opportunities within that segment. At the same time, we are all early enough in our careers that diversity is welcome, breadth is welcome. So I think you would, you might even find that you would want to stay on a path if you joined a payer organization, or stay on a path if you join pharmaceuticals. So if you're truly kind of agnostic to the exact segment of the industry, for me, when I'm deciding, whether I should take a new job, is it, always the gut check. Am I excited? Do I go to sleep, getting excited about this particular role? Is the hiring manager someone I really jive with? Because that will just define 80% of your experience. That, you could be at a great company and have a dud of a hiring manager, and then that just ruins everything. So make sure culturally that's a really good fit. And then just consider, does the role and the company provide the training that you're looking for? Do they have the resources to really invest in you and your own development, or are you going to have to kind of craft that for yourself? That is what pushed me to join big pharma originally over smaller biotech or smaller pharma, and then those individual roles, each one of those was largely informed by the hiring manager and my level of excitement with the job, and a good bit of also being nervous about the opportunity, which meant, okay, this is the right amount of stretch, and I should jump right in. If you feel too comfortable with the job and you meet 80% of the qualifications, you're overqualified, and don't do that job. Do the next one. So yeah. That's my point of view.
I will say that there's no easy answer to this. And like just hearing you ask that question, I immediately like flash back to exactly where I was like when I was in your shoes at Keenan Flagler. I struggled with this because I liked healthcare. I liked multiple aspects of healthcare. I worked in healthcare at a foundation, in consulting, big consulting, small consulting. I was interested in healthcare administration. I was interested in pharmaceuticals. So I think at some point, you know, you do your best, you go to all of the company presentations to get a feel for it. But in the end, where I ended up was somewhere that had like a diversity of options because I liked so many different things, because I have that opportunity in the pharmaceutical industry. But like, you know, I remember talking to one of my career coaches at Keenan Flagler, and I was like, I don't know if I made the right decision. Like, did I make the right decision with BMS? And she's like, at a certain point, you have to go for it. She's like, no, you're not held prisoner in any of these companies, right? Like, go for it, get the experience. If it doesn't work out, you're going to have an MBA, you're going to have experience at that company, and you will be able to move around, you know, especially if you gain these kinds of skills that we're talking about that are super transferable, you're going to be in a good spot. So don't sweat it too much and, you know, go for it. That's what I think was such good advice for me.
Yeah, one thing I guess I'll chime in with is I feel like I'm also trying to like put myself back in your shoes. I feel like there was I mean, think back about like, I don't know if any of you are undergrad, like I think about there's so much pressure on like that first job, that first role, right? It's like, I just put all the time in, like, is this the right move? And it's funny because we did a panel at Sanofi with actually for all of our CLDP members, because we just class that's about to exit, and they're all like, you know, panicking at like their first exit role. And it's like, the reality of it is you most likely, that's not going to be your last job, right? So I think, to like what Miriam has said, it's like, I think part of it's like a gut feeling, like go with what you think that you want to do. And worst case scenario, if you don't like it, like I'm assuming you're not going to be in that role like until you're like until you retire, right? Like you're going to have so many other roles in your lifetime. And so I think just like thinking about this as like one step in your like larger journey. And I don't think that there really is a bad choice you can make. Maybe that's just from my experience. Like I've been in like a company where there have been massive layoffs before. And even then it's been like a learning opportunity, right? So like all of that is to say, like, I feel like I try not to stress too much. I know it's easier said than done, but you know, it'll be the first of many roles that you'll have in the future.
Yeah. I had like we were like a big group of 8 women. We were in Carolina Women in Business. And out of all of us, I'm the only one in the same company after 5 years. So people are moving around pretty rapidly. And to that point, you know, get the experience. And if it doesn't work out, just on to the next.
Thanks, y'all.
I really appreciate those answers. And I'm not self-promoting, but our boot camp on the 22nd will have a pivoting panel, which discusses just this. And also just from the perspective of someone who's worked with a number of students, I think it's true. It's like no move is a bad move as long as you're taking calculated risks. I'm not saying just like throw the baby out with the bathwater, but calculated risks are good. And also don't belittle the fact of looking for jobs with good mentors, with good opportunities for you to develop as a professional. Because I think sometimes students go for big name and think, okay, big name's going to get me my next job or the next step, when sometimes it's if you have a great network, if you have a great mentor, if you have some great development opportunities, then that could mean not just for the next step, but 10 steps down the road. So thank you so much. Those were fantastic answers. So I'm going to jump back to Pranjal and then to Emma after that.
Yeah, thank you, Suzanne. I just was thinking about what Miriam said about diversifying, and I have a question specifically for Elise. Now, what I found fascinating about you, Elise, is that you started your journey as a sales rep. I've spent so much time with American sales rep over the past 4 years, understanding if they're happy with their sales territories, conducting immersion interviews. But mostly what I've observed is their careers typically progress into paths which lead to national sales directors or associate director of marketing. It looks like, Elise, you have pivoted to an area which is very close to healthcare investment banking. I don't know how many of my clients over the past 4 years have actually gone through an investment thesis and made decisions. Could you talk to how you walked down that path?
Yeah. So I was part of a graduate development program, the same as my colleagues on the call. So I would not have been able to make the transitions out of sales at the same pace were it not for that program. So GSK, I did 2 years in sales, and then I came in-house in payer marketing. From there, it was all on me to then make the jumps across payer marketing, and up and laterally, and then it was a pretty big transition from market access strategy then to pipeline strategy. But I had the help of the graduate development program to get back in house. So I would, I think all of you would probably, unless you see yourselves as a sales leader, would benefit from a program such as that, like a secondment or rotational program, so that you have a lifeline back in house, and you're not stuck in the field if you don't want to be. Though, quite frankly, there are a lot of people who love the field, and it offers perspective and work flexibility more than anything else. So happy to comment on that experience, but it was the graduate development program that pulled me back in.
That's fascinating. Thank you. Thanks, Elise.
Yeah.
And I'm going to pass this to Emma.
Hi, thank you, Elise, for your answer earlier about having thick skin in the industry. That was kind of a question that I was planning on coming with, was like, how do you all manage to work in an industry that does face so much scrutiny? And I guess just a little bit of background on me is I come from the policy world, so I am seeing like all of the warring kind of issues, like from the big pharma industry, the generic industry, PBMs and whatnot. So I kind of wanted to ask a follow-up question on the switching within the industry. So say I were to get a job with like a big pharma company after school, like how would it be unheard of to go and like kind of work in the generics, or would it be unheard of to kind of go towards the payer side? Because I'm still in this mindset of figuring out like where I land in my opinion, is just having this 360 view currently on the entire industry. So I was just like wondering what kind of movement between all the parties looked like.
Not unheard of, and I think I would see Miriam shaking her head as well.
Common.
Well, many of our colleagues, because we were in big pharma, and I don't know if this is true at BMS and Sanofi, have stayed at their respective companies for 10 plus years because they love it, and that was the way of big pharma. That's not the way of the future, and it's not the way of ambitious Kenan-Flagler students. So I fully anticipate all of us are going to move around, and not just, so it would be pretty boring if we all just move to pharmaceutical companies, because it's going to feel very similar. So many of my colleagues, especially coming from the payer marketing space, moved on to work at large PBMs, or a CVS healthcare like entity, and getting the kind of full spectrum of care. Several moved on to kind of wholesalers and distributors, so McKesson. So yes, that is encouraged. You will not be limited in transitioning. Again, it all goes back to making sure you have transferable skills. I'm sure all of us feel similarly, but I put a big plug for getting market access experience or payer experience in the industry. That type of background is a golden ticket often to jump elsewhere. Just as marketing in theory is a golden ticket to jump and work on any brand. But if you are interested in the PBM payer space, invest a little bit on what that looks like from the pharmaceutical side, and then go join Optum Healthcare and change the world over there. So it's the world is your oyster, and you're not limited by any means.
Thank you so much.
Terrific. And believe it or not, the time has just flown. So I am going to ask let's say, maybe we can squeeze in two, but first, like maybe just give one example. What do you wish that you had experienced in your undergrad, your MBA or graduate experience at Carolina that you didn't?
I can
more breadth. Go ahead, Alicia. Go ahead.
I don't know.
Or did you do it all and you have no regrets?
No, I have regrets. I didn't take many business courses. I only took personal finance because my dad's a professor at Kenan-Flagler and was like, you have to take personal finance, otherwise you're not going to be prepared for the world. And I wish I had taken more, just because it would give me the confidence earlier in those, earlier in my career, versus, having invested so heavily in psychology and academia and liberal arts. Obviously it didn't technically hold me back. It was more of a mental thing of like, I knew I had in my back pocket how to develop the value proposition, or how to do a forecast. I had to learn that on the job, as opposed to having those skills at Carolina. So, follow your passion for sure when you're at university, but definitely, seek to gain a few other practical skills along the way. And obviously all of you are doing it with your MBA, and I'm glad there's more opportunities for undergraduate students to take advantage of that.
Mm-hmm. It's a hard question. I feel like I did a lot. I wish I would have gone abroad. I applied, got in the program, and then decided not to, because I had FOMO about not being on campus. And now, I mean, it's like, you can't do it all, but I wish I would have done that. I think it would have been a great experience. Undergrad, I think I was less academically focused, to be honest, than I was in business school. And had I, committed to the cause a little bit more and done probably some better internships in college, I think my path would have been shorter to business school and to the pharmaceutical industry. But in the end, it all is part of the journey. I don't regret it. It's just, if I could do it all over again, I probably would have been a little bit more astute about finding those internships in undergrad.
It's funny because what I'm about to say is probably the opposite of that, but I'll say I was the same, that I was probably more academically and more focused in grad school than I was in undergrad. But I'm actually going to do a plug for something that I would say that I did a pretty good job of, and I would I don't know if I'm allowed to encourage people to do this, but like I know that we all went back to school for a reason, right? But at the same time, like I wouldn't neglect like kind of, I guess I'll just, be candid, of like your social life, right? Because I think about, especially within the pharma space, like this industry is smaller than you think it is. And I feel like when I connect with people that I went to school with, the people that I remember are the people that I created relationships outside of the classroom. While I did have classes with them, the people that I solely had classes with, like if they asked me for any insight, like, someone reached out of like, oh, I'm interested in this role at Sanofi. It's not that I won't help them, but it's very different if I actually have that relationship with that person, right? And so I think spend time in actually cultivating the relationships with your classmates. They're like, I guess they're not just your classmates, right? Like they're your future network. So I would, make sure to get to know people outside of the classroom. And I guess I was like, just like, actually get to know people.
For sure.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That's great advice. And I support that fully from what I have seen as well. I'm going to have one last question. If you could just mention one, either website or podcast or even book that people can read that might support their exploration of the industry of pharmaceuticals and or biotech.
So my favorite, because it's short, it's funny, and it is very reliable, is Drug Channels. It's run by Dr. Adam Fine, who is considered like the premier source of pharmaceutical economics. and he is always incorporating, I don't know, SpongeBob references to explain like the gross to net pricing bubble and Iron Man and things, which is just, you know, always amusing. But to me, the insights really help define how our industry is evolving and explain some really complicated healthcare, you know, realities in digestible terms. So Drug Channels by Adam Fine, it's a blog, and he then produces regular research as part of his consultancy.
Trying to think. I typically refer to Fierce Pharma. I get like a roll up of pharmaceutical news in my inbox every morning. Fierce Pharma tends to be the most up to date. I don't religiously check it, but it tends to be helpful. And then to learn about like other competitors or some of the companies that you're interested in applying to, 100% look at their earnings reports. It will give you a quick snapshot of everything that's top of mind for that business. It is like the best #1 thing I could tell you to do when you're applying to any company.
I guess I'll round us out. I was going to say also Fierce Pharma, but I also don't check it religiously. So I would say this is something I probably need to be better about. And so Elise, thanks for the Drug Channels. I like wrote that down. I would say, especially as you start to grow your network, I'm sure you have all those people that are very active on LinkedIn. I would say that that's sort of like an easy way for me to keep on.
Oh, we almost made it all the way through.
Bye, internet. Or
so I know it's 7:01. So Alicia, I hope you hear us somewhere, but thank you. I just want to thank our panel. I want to thank everybody who showed up tonight. I know it was just a horrible weather here, but thanks for sticking it out. Again, you can reach out to our guests through the Career Networks platform and also through LinkedIn, which we suggest. But again, thank you for your time, Miriam, Elise, and Alicia. So thank you so much. And come to our next one, guys. Have a great evening.
Bye,
Cheers.
everybody.
Bye.
Thanks all.
Really appreciate the time. Have a great evening.